Okay, so let's talk about supplier relationships because they are so important in all the various supply chain functions and activities. Your relationship with your suppliers is critical. They're critical to your performance and they're critical to the company's success, or else they wouldn't be your supplier. So, as I mentioned before, we're moving away from just talking about cost and price and leverage, and those things are still there. They'll always be there, and that's how you get better price, and that's how you're going to get better terms. That's how you're going to do those kinds of things. That has not changed, and no one's advocating taking that out of the equation. What we're saying is that there are other activities associated with supplier management that bring value to the company. And this is again the whole idea of partnering with key suppliers, which is a function of your risk assessment, and developing gain sharing and win-win and activities along those lines that create financial value for the firm. So just to hammer this back one more time, okay, we've said that supply chain managers have a new focus, and that is to move from cutting costs to new process and connectivity. So it's unlikely if all you do when you talk with a supplier is talk about cost, they're going to be willing to invest in a technology backbone necessarily to exchange information with you because they have no confidence that next week you're not going to find somebody else who's going to have a lower cost and you're going to toss them out. So this is why one of the reasons why one of the drivers as to why you want to have input from a variety of functions and activities. It's a multidiscipline team, as we just spoke about, and understand that when you choose a supplier, you're doing more than just choosing a piece price. You're choosing an entire suite of things that drive the company and how the company is going to be able to succeed. So if you want to have visibility, if you want to have connectivity, and you agree that that's an important part of your service portfolio, then you need to create that value, and you create that value both upstream and downstream. And so that's why you're looking at that. All right, so when we look at suppliers and we look at contract manufacturers, contract manufacturer is obviously one where you may be technically the manufacturer, but someone's making the products for you, and that is a contract manufacturer. The classic case, of course, is what we do in Asia and Korea and other places where someone's making a product with your brand name on it, but it's not. They're not yours. They're a contract manufacturer to you. So as I said in slide one, there, the manufacturer suppliers are its most important asset. And so that's why you want to treat these, you want to identify them, you want to prioritize them, you want to stratify them, and you want to have procurement strategies that are aligned with their impact on your business. So where they do have a strong impact, you absolutely want to be collaborating to the fullest extent possible. And you want to develop a working relationship there that you may not necessarily have with a tier 3 supplier, maybe even a tier 2 supplier. But remember that tier 2 supplier may be a tier 1 supplier to your supplier. So don't overlook the importance of that supply chain and your supplier's supplier, and vice versa, further upstream. Again, that risk assessment's got to go and look at that, because as you start to share data, if you share data with a contract manufacturer and they share that data with their tier 1 supplier, and that tier 1 supplier shares it with a tier 2, their tier 1 supplier, then all of a sudden you have a digital path all the way through that creates some aspect of risk, and you have to assess that. Just be aware that it's there. But everything indicates, all the research indicates that working relationships and collaboration delivers continuous benefits. And that's because these suppliers can help you do things. They are working with other companies, and they may see other kinds of processes or things that they can discuss that could help you. They might help you find another supplier. They might help you even in country. So there is pressure to collaborate, and the reason that's there is because if we collaborate and we have standard processes, we're reducing the exceptions, we're reducing manual costs. We've automated things like documentation. I mean, we were sending CAD diagrams to the Philippines in seconds, where we never could have done that before because we had collaboration. So we were using engineers in places all over the world, looking at CAD diagrams and revising those CAD diagrams and getting the input back, because we were able to automate the documentation, and those companies were prepared to work with us in terms of automating it. So that whole cycle, if you will, speeded up, increased our speed to market, and we also had then revision tracking and everything else associated with that, which is very key. So when you're talking about contract manufacturers, they also have, or should have, if they don't have, you don't want them, they should have a supplier screening process. You should be aware of what it is. You should be aware of how they manage it. They should have open quotes, and they should be in the right place in order to do it. So if you're in Asia, your geographic footprint, you would think, for their suppliers, isn't going to be South America. It might be, but if it is, then make sure that you understand why it is, because that wouldn't make a hell of a lot of sense if that was the case. Okay, so the key, I don't know how many times we need to say this, but it's technology. So it's standard process and technology. And the standard process is having various sets of tools like these available between you and your supplier. And it's all around improving visibility and accountability and control and document revisions and engineering change notices and product change notices, but being able to track what's going on here, all the way, and make sure everybody's following the same rules and the same guidelines. So this needs to be something you need to seriously think about as you think about supplier management. Again, start with that risk assessment, prioritize, stratify your suppliers. Have a plan that says, if there's a disruption, what's the impact and how are we going to recover from it? And that is how you get back in business. You don't wait for it to happen and then say, now what do we do? Or then try to make a split decision in terms of what do we do. You want to avoid that, because you're going to be under too much pressure otherwise. Okay, so this is just kind of a procurement chart that kind of shows where and why procurement is the linkage in this whole thing. So if you look at what the tactics are that are expected to generate the most business value, look at what they are. Consolidate to increase negotiating power. We spoke about that. That will never come off the table. It's still at the top, but look what's next. Supplier collaboration, early involvement in product, service, design, and development, performance of existing suppliers, new sources of supply. Okay, so these things right here are all part of your collaboration. Okay, this is all part of your collaboration, because your partners can help you do this, they can help you do this, they can help you do this, and they help you do that. So this is the trend. It's away from generating purchase orders, just talking about price, and moving towards collaborative tools, which are all digital. So why would you want to do that? Because by doing that, from the sourcing perspective, now you're looking at a much broader view of demand. And so when you look at demand, then your supply base, that is your supplier, is seeing that demand and then can say, I have the capacity to do it, or I don't have the capacity to do it. And again, one of the things that we've seen, again, with the developing countries, particularly China and India, is that as those middle class families come along, capacity demand capacity is bringing increasing pressure on the local market. So instead of that capacity being used for exports, it's being used to support the domestic economy. And so we're seeing some constraints in contract manufacturing capacity. It's being shifted to automobile production for China, where before it was automobile production for someplace else. So this is the type of balance that you have to have, and you need to understand and be able to map. Is your partner? How is your partner affected by that? So that's what we're looking at. And the way is obviously transparency. You don't get transparency if you're not a good partner, and that's the message. So you standardize these, you share these scorecards. You do have quarterly business reviews, and you look for ways that you can work together to take cost out of the system to improve the results. Okay, so when we get into particularly global sourcing, which is again more challenging, the more extended you are, obviously, the more complicated it gets because you're dealing with so many other factors outside of just North America or even just the U.S. Domestically. So when you're talking, this is what you're looking at. So when you look at that relationship, these are the kinds of things you want to look at. Where is that risk? Is there a risk in currency? Is there a risk in labor? Is there some kind of a risk associated with sustainability? That is, are we not using forested products that we're not allowed to use, as happened to some guitars a few years ago? You have to be aware of the so-called slave labor situation, which in social media can create a huge problem for a company, even though the company didn't even know about it. So again, this whole idea of emerging markets, which is BRICS. BRICS stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. So there is a BRIC and there's a BRICS, and the S is South Africa. Again, integration, finance. Make sure that you talk the talk with finance, because that's going to be critical. And these are the kinds of things that you're looking for. And again, I come back to this: the people that you want to have on your operating team are both quantitative and qualitative. That is, they have hard and soft skills, and they need to be able to work in teams. They want to work in teams, and they have the ability to work to be able to make decisions and realize that what happens in one function impacts another function, perhaps in a different way. And in some cases, in many cases actually, the logistics or the supply chain people are in the best position to help quantify what the impact of that is through optimization tools and or simulation tools. Supply chain logistics people are more comfortable in modeling those kinds of strategies than a lot of other people are, because the data it takes to meet it is very gritty data, and supply chain is very gritty, to say the least. So that's what supplier relationship management's all about. That's why you want to look at it. That's the benefits of doing it, and this is what companies are transitioning to, away from transactional type activities into strategic collaborative activities that address these kinds of issues, which are now becoming more and more apparent within the supply chain. So when you look at today's supply chain officer, which in some cases is you, this is what the research is saying that people are really focused on right now. This is a short list of challenges that are facing the chief supply chain officer. If this is one of the top ones, then this gets right back to what we just talked about, and that's collaboration. The number one supply chain disruption is cargo theft. Well, cargo theft now is based on, is much more targeted based on digital hacking of manifests. So the pirates now know what's on the ship. They know where it is on the ship because that's required in many cases. And they know at a level of detail below what they never had before because they have been able to, for however they were able to do it, to hack into a forwarder database or your database or the carrier's database. They've been able to do that. So when you think about so much of your data, whether it's a purchase order or whether it's an email or whether it's a diagram or whatever it is, there's a very routine exchange of information across this whole supplier base. And as I mentioned, not just your contract manufacturer, but their suppliers and that supplier's supplier. So up it goes, and all those are particularly are risk points, and you have to understand that and then try to figure out what to do with it. So we're trying to evolve. We're evolving from tactical to strategic, and we do that by basically saying by building the business case as to how it impacts corporate performance. And this then takes a different set of skills than a I don't want to say a pencil pusher, but somebody who's transactionally oriented, and not everybody can make that move. So you'll have to assess that. Doesn't mean there's not a place for them, but they may have to be redeployed depending upon their skill set. So the folks you want now are going to have a blend of this: operational, financial, and marketing skills. So they need to be able to work with people. They need to work externally. They need to work internally. They need to understand the operational impact of what they're doing and the financial impact. And it's just much more than just looking at a cost number. It's much bigger than that. So and again understanding that your suppliers as well as your customers are an asset and not looked at as just a cost. So that's it for